So very good morning to all of you. So we can discuss something. Do you have any doubts or? Yeah.
Sir, yes, sir. I have a doubt.
Yeah. Where?
Sir, in assignment for question number 2E.
2E. Let me
Yes, sir.
just check. 2E. You can see the screen? All of you can see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in the question 2, each of the cases you have to find what should be the conjugate prior. Now, definition of conjugate prior is such that a prior is said to be conjugate prior if it is such that when you consider that posterior distribution, that means theta given x, that belongs to the same family, right? So for example, if prior was normal, posterior also belongs to normal, then I say that your prior distribution, normal prior distribution is a conjugate prior. So what should be the conjugate prior in nk theta k? That we have already seen, right? So f theta k turns out to be e to power minus 1 by 2 sigma square summation xi minus theta whole square, right? So theta square term will come. So that means if I prior or also I take at normal e to power minus 1 by theta square, these theta square terms will get combined and I can make a perfect square, and again I'll get a normal distribution. So in this case, certainly it is normal, right? Part A. Part B, binomial theta when theta is the parameter. Binomial, what is the distribution of f theta x? N choose x, theta to power x, 1 minus theta to power n minus x. Multiplied by this would be the prior distribution of theta, and that is nothing but posterior, because posterior distribution is proportional to joint distribution of theta and x. Joint distribution of theta and x is how much? Distribution of x given theta, which is theta n choose x, theta to power x, 1 minus theta to power n minus x. Then what should be the prior so that I get the same family? Now prior would be in terms of theta. Now in theta given x, theta to power x, 1 minus theta to power n minus x is coming. So that means prior also, if theta to power something and 1 minus theta to power something comes, my posterior distribution would be again to the same family. So such a prior is beta prior, right? So in this case, then binomial n theta, theta you can take to be a beta prior. So theta to power alpha minus 1, 1 minus theta to power beta minus 1. Similarly, gamma theta, this you can take a uniform power distribution kind of a prior. This you can take as an inverse gamma prior. Now in the E part, n is a parameter, right? N can take value 1, 2, and so on. So what is the distribution of theta given x? N choose x, which is factorial n, factorial x, factorial n minus x, theta to power x, and 1 minus theta to power n minus x. I want a parameter on your theta is a parameter. So right, what should I multiply so that I get, for n, I get a distribution which belongs to the same family. So you take truncated Poisson, right? So probability that n is equal to k, you take as e to power minus lambda, right? Lambda up to power k by factorial k. And then the thing which you get by multiplying it would be a truncated Poisson, because from the binomial it would come as factorial n, factorial x, n choose x is factorial n, factorial x, factorial n minus x. Theta to power x, 1 minus theta to power n minus x. Multiplied by, you want on n. So n would be how much? N to power lambda, sorry, n to power x. No, probability n is equal to, capital N is equal to small n. So that is same as, yeah, e to power minus lambda, lambda to power n by factorial n. Now 1 minus theta to power n minus x was coming. So only n is a parameter because x is a constant in the posterior distribution. So this lambda to power n and 1 minus theta to power n minus x, I take it separate out because that becomes in the normalizing constant because x is a constant. So it would become a truncated Poisson again. So 1 minus theta into lambda to power n will come, right? And n is from truncated in the sense because you want your n to be 1, 2, 3, so on. Right?
Yes, sir.
You want n to be 1, 2, 3, so on. So that is why the prior which you will take is constant time e to the power minus lambda, lambda to the power n by factorial n. No, the prior which you will take is for n is e to the power minus lambda, n to the power k by factorial k. Or e to the power minus lambda, lambda to the power n by factorial n. Is that okay? Except
Yes,
that
sir.
you have to multiply it by a normalizing constant because your n is only 1, 2, 3, so on. So it would be c lambda times, c lambda is a normalizing constant, into e to the power minus lambda, lambda to the power n by factorial n, for n is equal to 1, 2, so on. Right? So that is what it should be. And then you can see posterior distribution is again truncated Poisson. Is that clear to everyone?
Sir, why wouldn't we consider the joint distribution of the sample?
Joint distribution of the sample means?
Means if we have x1, x2, xn, then the joint we have to consider the joint.
It wouldn't matter because binomial, again, it would be theta to power, what would it be? Theta to power summation xi? 1 minus theta to power n minus summation xi. Summation xi is constant, right?
Yes,
so
sir,
1 minus
but,
theta to power n only would come there also, right? Even if you have a sample.
Sir, if we consider in sample, then the calculation is more complicated.
because the combination and we have to take the product of the combinations.
Which problem you are talking about?
This problem, sir, if we consider n sample,
Right.
then in the joint distribution, we will have product I equal to 1 to n choose xi. So the calculation is complicated.
No, it would become factorial n to power, let us say, if you have a sample of size m, right? It would become how much? Product I is equal to factorial n to power m, factorial xi, factorial n minus m to power something, right?
Product of n minus xi would become
Product of n minus
xi factorial.
n minus xi is factorial, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, then it would be slightly complicated, but still you'll get some prior distribution, right? So that it belongs to the same family.
So, sir, if it is asked to compute the prior distribution, so can we compute from considering one sample only?
Yeah, in this case, normally I have meant one sample. Otherwise, I would have given you have a sample of size, right?
So, sir, in all the problem, it is nowhere mentioned to consider.
Problem 2, when nobody is mentioned, that means you're only talking of one probability distribution. That means your data has of this probability distribution, right?
Yes,
in problem 2, if nothing is mentioned, that means sample size is 1. That means your data has this distribution, right?
Oh, okay, sir.
Yeah. Anything else?
I have a problem regarding question number 6 of assignment 4.
6.
Yes, sir.
What is the problem?
So, sir, as you have mentioned in class that x bar will not be based with respect to any proper prior distribution, that is fine.
Right.
But you haven't mentioned any theorem which relates some not based estimator with minimax estimators. You have mentioned only one theorem in class, that if some delta pi is based with respect to
minimax leave. So what I'm saying is minimax part you can leave. That I'll do in the next lecture. So minimax part you can do. Rest of the thing you are able to do, right?
Yes, sir. I just couldn't prove that it will be minimax estimator.
So minimax, that theorem I have not done. So that part you can leave, proving minimax.
Sir, also there is generalized Bayes estimator.
It is generalized Bayes with respect to uniform prior.
Yes.
Yeah, so that you have done, that I have given in the lecture notes, right, Salusan?
Yes, sir. The expression for generalized Bayes estimator you have given in the class. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that is there in the lecture notes.
Yes, sir. So, so basically in that expression, that fs theta that you are mentioning there, fs theta.
What?
Fs theta, that is coming from that prior distribution. So it is not a proper probability distribution, right?
No, uniform is not a proper prior distribution in whole real line, right? Because it will integrate out to infinity.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So it will not. But then I have said, still you can talk about base, which minimizes integral over L theta A, F theta X, d pi theta. Now d pi theta in this case is only d theta.
Yes, sir.
Right? So you can still talk about minimizing theta minus A whole square, F theta X, d theta. And if you do that, it turns out to be X bar, right? Minimizing it. That is what I have shown in the lecture notes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, any other doubt anybody has? And this I have shown in one of those video lectures also, this problem.
Sir, can you scroll down? Means,
Yeah.
okay, 1 minute, sir. Sir, 9C, sir.
Right. B you are able to do? 9?
Yes, sir.
Huh?
Yes, sir. 9A and 9B B is done.
Now note that when we talk about admissibility, any estimator which is admissible under this loss function, which is just constant time theta, would be admissible under A minus theta whole square, because theta into 1 minus theta would be common when I am comparing the risk of two estimators. You see, if you consider a risk of any estimator over here, what it will be this? Risk under the loss function A minus theta whole square by theta into 1 minus theta. So if I have two estimators, delta 1 and delta 2, their risk would be this theta into 1 minus theta would be constant factor, and it would be the square error loss function of the two. Delta 1 minus theta whole square and delta 2 minus theta whole square, expected value of that. So this would be common, theta into 1 minus theta. If this is common, this will cancel out when I am comparing the risk. So that means any estimator which is admissible under this loss function would be admissible under just A minus theta whole square. Because risk function, when I talk about admissibility, it is only about comparison of the risk. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
So for example, if you have to write down, if you ask me how to write down this exam, you have done part B, right?
Yes, sir.
Now in part C, I suppose X bar is inadmissible under square error loss function, right? What does that mean? That means there exists estimated delta naught such that expected value of delta naught minus theta whole square is less than or equal to expected value of X bar minus theta whole square with strict inequality for some theta. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
But then if there is an inequality, theta into 1 minus theta is positive. So I can divide both the sides by theta into 1 minus theta, inequality doesn't change. So that means expected value of X bar minus theta whole square divided by theta into 1 minus theta would be greater than or equal to expected value of delta naught minus theta whole square divided by theta into 1 minus theta for every theta between 0 and 1 with strict inequality for some theta. But what is that? That means loss function of X bar upon M is larger than loss function of some other estimator delta naught under this loss function. And that would prove that X bar M is inadmissible for this loss function. Is that okay?
Sir,
Can you repeat once more?
You have proved delta naught is admissible under this loss function, right? Is that okay?
Yes.
You have to prove that X bar is admissible. You have to prove that X bar by M is admissible under this loss function. You have to prove that X bar is admissible under A minus theta whole square. First of all, understand the common sense. Just apply the common sense. When you talk about admissibility, it is only comparison of the classical risk, right? So if the classical risk, I multiply it by some constant throughout, the admissibility under the loss function should not change. Now this loss function is same as A minus theta whole square, except that you have a theta into 1 minus theta. Right? So the admissibility should not change. That is what the common sense says. Now if you have to write down this properly, suppose in part C, X bar is not admissible. Actually, it is X bar by M, I should say. Right? X bar by M it should be. The same estimator over there. Suppose X bar by M is not admissible. So what does that mean? There exists estimated delta naught such that risk of delta naught, that means expected value of X bar minus theta whole square. Sorry, expected delta naught minus theta whole square is less than or equal to expected value of X bar by M minus theta whole square for every theta with strict inequality for some theta, because I am saying that it is inadmissible under square error loss function. Theta into 1 minus theta is positive, so I divide both the sides by theta into 1 minus theta, inequality doesn't change. So that would say that expected value of delta naught minus theta whole square by theta into 1 minus theta is less than or equal to expected value of X bar minus M minus theta whole square divided by theta into 1 minus theta with strict inequality for some theta. But once you have divided theta into 1 minus theta in this loss function, A minus A, it becomes this loss function. So that means the risk of delta naught under this loss function is less than or equal to risk of X bar M under this loss function for every theta with strict inequality for some theta. And that proves that X bar M is admissible under this loss function. But you have shown that X bar M is admissible. Is that okay?
Yes, sir, but I have to show X bar, means you told that X bar by
over here. It should be X bar by M.
Okay, sir, then it is fine. Means then I can.
No, just let me just see. X1, X2, Xn, each is expected of Xi is M theta, right? What would be expected value of expected value of X bar would be M theta, so it would be X bar by M. Here it should be X bar by M. So part C, there is a typo, you correct it, it should be X bar by M. Is that okay?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yes, any other problem?
Sir, in problem number 10, as the both parameter mu and sigma is unknown, so then I have to consider conjugate, means I have to consider a conjugate prior, and then I show that the supremum over theta belongs to script H, or delta theta is equals to infinity.
So you see, one way is you consider a conjugate prior, right? Conjugate prior, you consider supremum over theta r delta theta for any estimator. Now, supremum will always be greater than or equal to average risk. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Delta theta would always be greater than or equal to average risk of r delta theta. But average risk is minimized by the base estimator. Right? So,
yes, sir.
Average risk of delta theta would be greater than or equal to average risk of base estimator. Average risk of base estimator, you know, you can calculate because base estimator,
yes, sir.
Base estimator, you know. So what you get is supremum over r delta theta is always greater than or equal to something which is in terms of parameter alpha and beta. Right? Now you can take alpha and beta, could be anything. You can choose alpha and beta so that it becomes infinite. So supremum would always be greater than or equal to infinite. That is a one way to do it. Let me see if I can show you if it is there in the lecture notes. Yeah. So normal case. Yeah, so normal case, what I do is, yeah, so let us look at. Actually, one could use here normal mu naught and something, right? Normal mu naught and sigma naught square, right? I choose prior pi to be normal mu naught and sigma naught square. If I choose that, what would be the posterior distribution? Nx bar by sigma naught square plus mu naught by tau naught square. You see what I'm saying is, let us choose prior to be normal with mean as mu naught and variance as tau naught square. Is that okay? Rather than 0 and sigma m square, I choose prior to be normal, mu naught and tau naught square. If that happens, the posterior distribution will turn out to be Nx bar by sigma naught square. Sigma naught square is the variance of original distribution plus mu naught upon tau naught square divided by n upon sigma square plus 1 upon tau naught square. Right? So what would be the base risk of that? We have calculated base risk, right? R pi m delta pi m, when mean was 0, it was turning out to be sigma square by n upon sigma square by n plus 1. Right? This is what turns out to be. Is that okay? Now, when mu naught was also there, they would have been a mu naught over here. So what you get over here is in this case, supremum risk of any estimated delta would always be greater than or equal to average risk of delta. But average risk is always minimized by the base estimator. So average risk of delta would always be greater than or equal to average risk of a base estimator. If you take prior to be mu naught and tau naught square, it turns out to be something in terms of a mu naught. Now you can take mu naught going to infinity and tau naught suitably, so that everything goes to infinity. So what you get is supremum r delta theta would always be greater than or equal to infinity. So that means it would be exactly equal to infinity. That is what it is. That is a one way to do it. Other way to do it is, what I do is I first fix sigma naught square. Right? If I fix sigma naught square, if I fix sigma x square, then I know that x bar is minimax, which of course will be done using a theorem to be done in the next lecture. So yeah, so let us not use that approach because that we haven't done. So you try to do it using the prior distribution only. Is that what I have said?
Yes, sir. But sir, the second part, when the support of our parameter is reduced, then
no, that part you may leave. That part you may leave for the mid-semester exam, right? Second part you may leave. That will be in the next lecture. It is easy, but easy, you can forget about it for this lecture because I'll do a small result which will prove this. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
So this supremum r delta theta infinity is finite, is okay, because you can consider any prior. You can consider prior on mu to be mu naught and tau square. Find out the average risk of a base estimator or the base risk of a base estimator. If base risk of a base estimator goes to infinity by choosing some parameter in the prior distribution, then this would be greater than or equal to base risk of a base estimator. So that would also go to infinity. Is that okay? That is the whole.
Sir, basically it means here mu and sigma both are unknown. So when I am considering the prior distribution, should I have to consider both prior distribution for both mu and sigma?
No, so one way is first you only prove, first you fix sigma square, right? First you fix sigma square, right? For fixed sigma square, you know the base estimator. Then you have to consider only prior for mu.
Yes, sir.
Right? Only for prior mu. Then what you say is R delta mu sigma square when only you are varying mu. Right? That itself is so goes to infinity for any fixed sigma square. So when sigma square are also varying, you are talking about supremum over a larger set. Supremum over a larger set would be further larger. right? So first you prove it for fixed sigma square, it goes to infinity. Then for any sigma square, it will go to infinity. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Because first I saw that for any fixed sigma square, supremum over mu r delta mu sigma, where sigma is fixed, goes to infinity for any fixed sigma. Now I vary sigma also. When you vary sigma, I talk about supremum over a larger set, because now sigma is taking more values. And you know that supremum over a larger set is larger. So that would also go to infinity. So what I'll do is I'll try to do this problem today in my video lecture, and then I'll try to release that video lecture by evening. Is that okay? So that you can, so this problem I can do today in the video lecture. Any other problem you want me to do today in the video lecture?
Sir, means I only solved the first 14 problem, and there are 2 more problems, 15 and 16. So I don't
forget about 16. You can forget about.
Okay, sir. Means I have to do 1 more problem.
15 is straightforward, right? 15 there you don't have to do anything.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Yeah. Any other doubt anybody has? So I'll try to do some of the, so what I'll do is first, I'll try to do few problems today to, in the video lecture, and then I'll release those video lectures by evening, most likely. Then you go through those video lectures, and then this assignment should be obvious, I think. Yeah, any other problem anybody has?
Sir, in problem number 3.
Problem number 3. Yeah.
So here, if we can show that the base risk of X bar with respect to any prior is not equal to 0, will it suffice?
You have to also show that X bar is unbiased.
Yes, sir. That part I have shown.
Yeah. So because then we did a result that if you have any unbiased estimator and it is also based under a square error loss function. Loss function is also important. So if you have any unbiased estimator and it is also based respect to square error loss function, then its base risk has to be 0. Now here X bar I know is unbiased. You have a square error loss function. So if it is a base respect to a proper prior distribution, its base risk has to be 0. But you saw that base risk is different from 0. So that means
yes,
it cannot be based respect to any proper prior distribution by the result which we did in the class.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
So same thing you did in the normal case also, right? Because normal case also X bar is unbiased. So
yes, sir.
It had to be based under square error loss function. Its base risk had to be 0. But its base risk is constant, sigma naught square by n or 1 by n, depending on what your variance is. All right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Any other doubt you have?
So it would be great if you could solve 9C in the video lecture also.
9C.
9C, that, yes, yes, sir.
9C, I'll do that. 9A and B.
Yes, sir, 9C and
I think they are there in the lecture notes itself, A and B, right?
Yes, sir. 9A and B is simple.
So what I'm saying is, actually, this result, I can prove a much more general result. It doesn't have to be do with binomial. What I'm saying is, let us say your loss function is L theta A, right? And if delta naught is admissible under loss function L theta A, I consider another loss function L star theta A, which is W theta times L theta A, where W theta is positive function. So that means the loss function L theta A and L star theta A are exactly same, except that in L star theta A, you have multiplied W theta. So there is a weight function over there. Then any estimator which is admissible under L theta A would be admissible under W theta L theta A. That is what the general result is. And the idea is very simple, because when you talk about the admissibility, you're talking about the classical risk, not the base risk or the supremum risk. You're only talking about the risk, expected value of L theta delta or expected value of L star theta delta. Let us look at what is the difference between the two risks. When I'm considering the loss function L theta A, my risk is expected value of R delta theta is expected value of L theta delta. When I'm considering L star theta, which is W theta L theta A, it is W theta into R delta theta, the risk of earlier one. Right? Now, if any estimator is admissible under this, has to be admissible under that, because if it is not admissible, that means there exists some estimator over there, which is better. That means its risk is smaller. If its risk is smaller, I can multiply by W theta both the sides. So it could be smaller there also. So I'll do that. I'll explain it. So I'll prove a much more general result, and then this follows immediately from here, right? I'll prove that in any estimation problem, if delta is admissible under loss function L theta A, then delta would also be admissible under the loss function W theta L theta A, where W theta is any function which is positive. And that is what is happening over here. When you are having a squared error loss function, it is A minus theta whole square. This loss function becomes W theta times A minus theta whole square, where W theta is nothing but theta into 1 minus theta. Okay? Yeah, any other doubt anybody has?
Sir, in problem number 8.
Yeah.
So in the last part, can you tell the range of the A and B for which it is admissible and inadmissible? So I can check that if I am correct or wrong.
Number 8. I haven't worked it out.
Yes, sir.
Let me see if I can. I might have. So you see, first thing is, you know that any Bayes estimator is admissible, right? At least in the exponential family.
Yes, sir.
So in this case, for example, this alpha naught is not, I derive the Bayes estimator. So let me see if I have. So any estimator, in this case, with respect to prior alpha naught, beta naught, the Bayes estimator turns out to be of the type n upon alpha naught plus n minus 1 x bar plus 1 upon mu naught into alpha naught plus n minus 1, right? Now, n upon alpha naught plus n minus 1 or n plus 1 can go anything from 0 to n upon n plus 1. So with that, you can get a range of alpha. So that means A belonging to 0 to open interval 0 to n upon n plus 1 and B belonging to 0 to infinity. Delta is admissible. It comes only from the Bayes estimator, right? Because it will be Bayes and you can keep varying alpha naught and mu naught to get different Bayes estimators, and all of them are admissible. That would give you a range as A belonging to 0 to n upon n plus 1 and B belonging to 0 to infinity. Now then I consider risk of AX bar plus theta. Now, so when A is equal to n upon n plus 1, you can show that n upon n plus 1 x bar plus B is admissible for any B positive, right? So the only cases which are remaining now is A greater than or equal to n upon n plus 1. Now you can show that A greater than or equal to n upon A greater than upon n plus 1 is inadmissible. Right? I'll try to see if I can get this this normal one you have done. So this 7 and 8
Yes,
AX plus AX bar plus B I'll try to do in the so let me note it down. The problems which you want to do, either I'll what are the
So
problems?
problem 7 is fine.
Problem 7 is okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then you want me, so let us look at from the beginning. Problem 1 is okay? Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Problem 2 is okay? No?
Sir, for part A, the calculation is coming out to be complicated.
Why? It would be just x minus theta transpose x minus theta, right? E to power minus half x minus theta transpose x minus theta and some constant. Now, if you take again theta to be some mu, so it would be e to power minus theta transpose minus theta minus mu naught or theta minus theta naught transpose sigma naught inverse theta minus theta naught. This all you must have done, right? These are regression analysis, combining the terms, except that now it is a quadratic form.
Oh, okay, sir. I will try them.
Yeah, it is a quadratic form, that's all. So you see theta transpose, theta would come from the x given theta, because there is no sigma. So theta transpose theta would come. And from the second one, you'll get theta transpose sigma naught inverse theta
Sigma
naught.
inverse theta. Yes,
Right?
sir.
Now you can combine the two, it becomes theta transpose I plus sigma naught inverse into theta naught. Right? And then play
Yes, sir.
around with this. It is just straightforward.
Oh, okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Right? So yeah, any other problem you want to discuss? So first four, I think I'll already do. 5 you can do, right? Five, anybody has a doubt? So as I understand, you have a problem with 6 is also done. 7 is also done. You have some problem with 8, right?
Yes, sir.
Problem number 8. Problem number 9, C part, right?
Yes, sir.
Mainly C part. Problem number 10, basically problem number 10 and this problem, Poisson problem, where is that? I think, no, problem 10, right? Problem 10 and 12 are okay, is same, right? 10 and 12.
Yes, sir.
11 is same as 11 is exactly same as proving that x bar is admissible, right? Except that here you have to consider the risk function as mod of a minus theta. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so these problems I'll try to do today. And if you have any other, you can write it to me. I'll try to see if I can post them, scan them, but don't do it at the last moment. You don't expect that I'm just sitting for your service all the time. And the moment, so you have to give me a notice in advance that this is the problem you're having. First discuss between yourself. If you still have issues, send it to me. Some of them I'll try to solve today and try to release the video by today evening. Yeah, so any other doubt from the lecture notes or? Yeah. So our exam is on Monday, right?
Yes, sir.
What time it is?
Yes, sir.
It is in the morning, right? 9 to something. 9 to 11 or whatever. So what I'll do is, there may be 4 or 5 problems, right? Depending on this thing. So this part, so I've said that one problem could be from location and scale, or I can put one from the location, one from the scale, one from the, 2 from the affine equivalent, no, one. So what I can do is, let me just work it out. So your quiz 1 was location and scale, right? Quiz 1 was mainly location. So what I'll do is 1 I'll put from location scale and remaining 3 from affine and base. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
That is the, so I'll, and then I'll release 2 questions each hour. Roughly 50 minutes you might get. because you have to upload also answers scripts. So 50 minutes for answering and then 10 minutes for uploading, and then the second part will be used. Have you seen your quiz marks?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I hope you people are not copying, right?
No, sir.
Huh?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Because if I'm going to do some consistency tests and then I'm going to take exam again. And so be careful if you are collaborating, and don't feel that you will go unnoticed. Right? Because these ethical issues are very important in life. If you become unethical, now you will remain unethical throughout life. And if you're in abroad and you do unethical practices, you could be in big trouble. Your whole life may be ruined. So my advice would be get lesser marks, that's okay, but don't compromise on your ethical standards. Because it becomes your habit. If you compromise with your ethical standards, it becomes your habit. And then when you're in trouble, nobody comes to your escape. You might have heard a lot of successful Indians got into trouble outside just because they thought it's okay to be unethical. Yeah, so any other thing you want to discuss? I'll be doing consistency tests, so yeah.
Sir, I have a doubt in the definition of minimax estimator.
So you see, if you remember when I started this Bayes and minimax estimation, I had said, you see the problem why we are not able to find the best estimator in the sense that which minimizes the risk at every theta, is the fact that you're trying to minimize a function. Now, minimizing a function at every theta becomes a problem. So it is like you're talking about two functions and you're saying one function will always be below other for every theta. So one function will be at the bottom all the time. That is not possible, right? Because functions you can always construct through your artificial intelligence. For example, as I said, a constant function, its risk would always be zero at one particular point. No other estimator can have that smallest risk at a particular point. So minimizing risk at every theta becomes a problem. And the problem is coming because you're trying to minimize a function. So the whole trouble is because you're trying to minimize a function. So what you try to do is, rather than minimizing a function, you try to minimize some characteristic of this function. So one such characteristic function is, I try to minimize the average value of this function. That means theta is a variable, so I take the average with respect to some prior distribution. Once I have taken an average, theta integrates out and you get a constant quantity for each estimator. So different estimator would have a different constant value of this Bayes risk. So now I am no longer minimizing a function. So it is possible to get the best estimator, and we call such estimator to be the Bayes estimator.
Sir, means first I have to maximize the risk and then I find an estimator which minimize the maximum risk.
No. See, what I'm saying is, first let us look at Bayes estimator, what you are doing. Prior is fixed. For that fixed prior, this prior is same for all the estimators. For this fixed prior, you have an average risk for all the estimators, right? So you have estimator 1 whose average risk is A1. You have estimator 2 whose average risk is A2, and so on. You have a lot of estimators, in fact, uncountable number of estimators. Then you look at estimator for which this average risk is minimum, right? Minimexity, what you do is, for each estimator, you see what is its maximum risk. So your estimator delta 1, its risk is R delta theta. You try to find out what is its maximum respect to theta. So risk Estimator number 1 has a maximum risk. Estimator 2 has a maximum risk. The way every estimator had a base risk, every estimator has a maximum risk. So among all the estimators I see, for which estimator this maximum risk is minimum. That is a minimum.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Now it is clear.
Right?
Yes, yes.
Yes, any other doubt? Yes, any other? We can have a quick round of doubts, one or two. So what are the other exams you're having? One is mine, and then what are the other courses where you have exams?
The time series, stochastic, simulation.
So all 5 courses you have exams, right?
Yes, sir.
So what's your experience with this online teaching? It looks like is much more strenuous than your usual classroom teaching. What do you feel?
Yes, sir. I also feel the same.
For me as a teacher, it is turning out to be a nightmare. Now you can understand, every day I have to sort out those videos. Even sorting out those videos becomes a difficult. You have to go record each of these videos, then take care of that all videos. Somebody else does the editing, you don't do editing. He makes errors. You have to be careful that those errors, then I have to make sure that these lecture notes are at least available to you. Solutions was becoming too much. First 3 assignments took a lot of time for me. Discussion hours become much more strenuous because I'm not sure, I don't see your faces. When I see physically, when I meet physically with you people in the classroom, I can make out a lot of things from the faces of students sitting over there, how things are going. So that way I have to make a lot of efforts over here just to make sure that you're trying to understand and I'm doing my job properly. That becomes strenuous. I was imagining the same thing for students because for me, it is a one course. You're dealing with 5 professors like me. Some may be showing no mercy like me. And then you're bombarded with a lot of assignment problems. So this I am afraid, this is what my view is. This might have serious psychological issues. You may be burnt, means I may be burnt out. I am going to be burnt out after this semester. I can't teach like this in the next semester. I don't know how do students feel, whether they can cope up with this kind of a structure next semester also. If let us say next semester also there is similar kind of structure and online teaching. Will you be able to sustain it?
Sir, it is very difficult.
You see, if there is a summer break in between, possibly you can go and do something. But if the semester immediately starts and then, means at least for me, it's going to be difficult. So it's taking a lot of, still you're not satisfied that you're doing the best job. So, and I'm sure same must be true with students. It's a general apprehension among students. Do you ever discuss this issue, or because your feedback is important in formulating policies for the next semester? So it's important that you.
Sir, is next semester going to be operated online also?
I don't know.
Now this is a serious issue.
Huh? What do I say?
Now this is a serious issue.
Yeah, so hopefully, let's hope that next semester you all would be in campus.
Yes, sir.
But still, what I would suggest is these last 2 semesters or last 1.5 semester have been a learning experience for all of us. And human civilization has progressed because we learn from the past. So all these experiences, I would say that don't go waste. You try to document it somewhere, discuss it between yourself. If somebody can document it somewhere, pass it on to the appropriate persons like me. You can pass it on to me based on your experience in the course, general experience in the online teaching. That may be helpful for the future, because you never know. Again, in the future, we might face similar kind of a situation. And then possibly we may be better prepared to deal with situation. Right now, I think it is very ad hoc. We all are doing in our own way without looking at what is its overall impact. All right. So just think over it, discuss between yourself, and whatever merits and demerits this mode of teaching has, try to pass it on to appropriate persons. I would be more than happy to receive feedback for my course, or even in general, what the feedback is. I can pass on that feedback to appropriate persons in the institute. So that's all I have. I'll try to do some assignment problems. If you want me to solve any specific problem, let me know. I'll try to post the solutions on the MOOCIT platform. All right? Okay, good luck.
Sir, you can roll out feedback form to know the situation. How is it going?
You see, what happens if I rule out of a feedback form, I might ask questions which only I can think. I want that you tell from your open mind, whatever it is.
Sir, you can also make available that option so that anyone can write his or her suggestion.
I would say that in general, compared to the regular semester where you have a physical meeting, you try to, anyway, this course would have a reaction survey at the end. But in general, I'm talking about this whole philosophy of online teaching. If you can, it doesn't have to be very formal. You can write down in the bullet points, these are the advantages, these are disadvantages, so on.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye, sir.
Okay, bye.